So Brendan,
Right on. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for the introduction. Hi, everybody. I'm Brendan from PoolTogether. I've got three things to talk about today. One is I want to introduce PoolTogether because I don't know if everybody has necessarily seen it or knows what it is. I want to quickly run through the architecture, sort of high level, how does everything fit together? What big pieces do we have in play? And then finally talk a bit about the protocol and how we transition to it. So I'm just going to share my screen. And bear with me, these slides are slightly slapped together like a Frankenstein from different events, so they may be a little rough. Not nearly as beautiful as yours, Tim's. So let me just go full screen here. So let's start at the beginning. So PoolTogether. What is it? PoolTogether is a Prizelink savings account. And so prize savings are a fun way to make savings more interesting, much more interesting than a typical savings account. So every dollar you put into the prize, or rather into the account, is a chance to win the prize. And so the prizes are the interest that's accrued on all deposits. And this is kind of neat because it means that these prizes are generated in perpetuity and are no loss. So that means you don't lose your principal on it. So it's a really interesting mechanism. So versus getting like 0.35% APY on some savings account, you can actually have a potential to win everyone else's interest. And it's actually a pretty old idea. All of these countries run state versions of Prizelink savings accounts. Of course, they're all run by the government because it's highly controlled and yada, 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 and we're all familiar with that. The biggest one is in the UK. They have a $100 billion fund that has 20 million different accounts. And each year they give away 1.3 billion in prizes. What's interesting to note though, is they actually generate about 9 billion in interest, but I guess 7.7 billion actually goes into the public funds. And so it funds roads and infrastructure, of course, being government run, that's where the money goes. And this kind of, I guess, public service is somewhere we'd like to go eventually. It's a really interesting way to give back to the community in a fun way. And so here's some fun old posters. These are just ancient, like from the 50s and 60s, but this has been around for a long time. So we're really not, reinventing the wheel here. But what's amazing is how blockchain really enables this. We built this in the first version we built in a week. And so it just makes it very easy to put this kind of thing together. And so prize savings live in a very interesting risk reward area. So typical savings accounts, bonds, stocks, ETH, startups, there's a risk return profile that increases the higher the returns are. Prizelink savings are this weird tool that has very low risk, but the potential for a very high return. This actually happened a couple of weeks ago. We had a winner that had $73 or 73 DAI deposited, and they won 44,000. And so that's quite the return for them. Really lucky winner. And granted, we do have a lot of whales winning because they have a higher chance of winning, hence the $1 one chance, but it is still possible. And so we were really happy to see that prize. And so you don't have to pick between safety and reward. You can have a couple bucks in, like the Beastie Boys say, you got to be in it to win. And so just make sure you have a little bit in PoolTogether and you'll have a chance to win potentially big money, which is pretty exciting. And we're now giving away just under $250,000 in prizes every week. And so, and two of the main prize pools each are awarding about 80,000 US. So every week you get a chance to win. And the cool thing is you deposit once and then you have a chance in perpetuity. It just lives there forever. So don't have to worry about withdrawing. It's just a couple of bucks. So that was pretty quick intro, but I feel like that does set the stage. In general, it is a fairly simple product, at least from the consumer point of view. In terms of the architecture, so we've tried to keep it as simple as possible, using serverless tech, just trying to use the RPC as much as possible. We kind of pushed that to its limits, and Infura got mad at us. But anyway, there's essentially 4 layers to this. We've got the static front end. Right now it's hosted on Netlify, but I'm looking into Fleek. Fleek is interesting. There's caching and indexing. And so this is the layer like the graph, which actually provides us with tooling to be able to create different views of the blockchain and in a very efficient way. And then we have Infura, of course, to which we still have to make requests sometimes. And then finally, we have Cloudflare. And Cloudflare bundles that all up and caches it so that we don't incur huge monthly costs. Then we have our smart contracts that live under that. This is where the application lives. This is the core. This is where the winners are selected, where the money lives, and then that itself lives on the blockchain. So Ethereum is our main blockchain, but we are looking to expand, and I'll get into that list next. Oh yeah, so I just went into this. So in terms of the actual software architecture, we've kind of changed it over the years, but fundamentally everything is built around a prize pool, and the prize pool is a non-upgradable contract. We wanted this to be as non-custodial as possible, and so what it does is users deposit into the prize pool, which then deposits into a yield source. And the yield source can be, a lending protocol like Compound or Aave. We're also integrating Sushi. And so Sushi Swap has a sushi bar, which allows you to earn the fees on your deposited sushi. And so it's a no loss yield. And so we're actually going to integrate it as well. And then so the interest, the prize pool then exposes to a prize strategy. And the cool thing about this is the very low coupling between the prize strategy and the prize pool. So the kind of the game itself could be anything. Prize savings are just one aspect of this. Some hackathons we've seen participants build things like a horse race essentially, but sort of between tokens. It's like at the end of the week, the token that went up the most will be the one that wins, and whoever bet on that token gets the interest from everyone. So you can make up all sorts of weird games if you want on top of the interest. It's pretty cool. But so our flagship strategy is the multiple winner strategy. And so this is the prize savings strategy. And it uses a random number generator to select the winner from the pool of token holders. And then of course those token holders get the interest in the form of more tickets. So as they win, their chances increase, and so on. So in terms of the blockchains that we're on right now, I think this is pretty interesting to talk about because just 2 days ago, we deployed to Polygon, and we're really excited about that move. It feels like Ethereum was 2 years ago in that we have like very cheap transactions and not a lot of congestion. And so our users are really happy with it. The pool that we launched 2 days ago now has 2.7 million in, I think. So it's gone up pretty fast, which is great. And what's good about it as well, Polygon in particular, is that the bridge is as secure as the sidechain itself. And so we're pretty comfortable with moving back and forth and having these pools eventually be governed by our L1 on Ethereum. But in the short term, in the future, we're looking at Optimism as well. Big fan of Mark and the Optimism team. I really like what they're doing, as well as ZK Sync. Their ZK Sync 2.0 with the EVM compatibility is going to be really interesting. Although I have not yet played with it, so looking to get into that. And finally, let's talk about the protocol. So this is really interesting for us because we started as a small product team. We were just 3 people, just under 2 years ago, and we ran with the product as long as we could so that we could find product market fit before launching a token and doing that whole business, because that definitely complicates things. So we wanted to make sure that we had product market fit before launching a token. But we did feel ready. And in February of this year, we did launch the Pool token. And what that means is that our product became a protocol, in the sense that protocols are apps that are controlled by the users through that lens. If we're looking at it through that lens, that's essentially what it is. And so we launched the Pool token. We retroactively dropped it to all the past users, as is common these days, and also began a liquidity mining program for existing token holders, or ticket holders rather. And then begins the votes. And so we've had 8 different successful proposals so far that have changed the system, the majority of which have come from third parties. One which was to enable the reserve on pools, which is actually capturing a portion of the interest and retaining it in the pool as sponsorship, but under the ownership of the protocol. that was done by some random person, and it actually took us by surprise when it did get executed. But it was cool to see users actually take control of this thing. So it's been a very interesting transition in terms of going from a product over which we control every aspect to instead inverting this and facing outward to our community to kind of corral all of these different stakeholders. And so it's been a really interesting experience to try to manage that, but also just get buoyed by the energy of all the people. It's amazing launching a token and just seeing the people rush in and be like, how can I help? We've had so many contributors come in over the last few months, and it's pretty exciting to see when people have skin in the game, how much that can align incentives. So that's been a lot of fun to see. So that concludes the presentation. Happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thanks for that, Brendan. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hands or drop it in the chat. I have a question for you, Brendan. How are like winners selected in PoolTogether?
That's a good question. That's a good question. We use a sortition sum tree, which is basically like a tree data structure that is able to be updated in logarithmic time. So it's pretty fast, but it does mean that gas usage there's like 100,000, 150,000 premium on deposits and withdrawals. But it does mean that we can basically index the entire supply of tokens and select, all right, let's give me token 3,042,000, and we can find the address that holds that. Even if it's kind of, it's not it doesn't correspond. Of course, they're purely fungible tokens, but it allows us to actually at least uniquely pick a person. So.
Cool.
And then on a related note, somebody asked, how did you randomly generate the numbers? That's a really good question. So we've got a couple different options. The first, of course, which is the weakest and one that we only use for sort of test pools, is the block hash. And the second one that we use for most of our pools is the Chainlink VRF. And so VRF it's pretty good to the extent that it means that it's a deterministic way for someone to sign a message to produce a unique result. And the VRF is tweaked such that you can only, so each signature has a unique number or a unique result that it corresponds to. And so with Chainlink, they have an oracle to which we make a request, and then they sign the message, and we just send them the block hash, which they then sign, and they are committed to that because they've publicized the signing public key on chain, and then we consume that as the random number. But the one that we'd like to move to, one that Starker has rolled out, is the VDF, which hopefully I can explain in 2 sentences. But the VDF is essentially like a puzzle that takes time to compute. And the cool thing about it is that you can come up with this seed just fairly randomly, like let's say it's the block hash. And then you can select the number of iterations required to compute. And you can kind of tune it. So it requires, let's say, 10 minutes with the best computer that you can find. And it's very difficult to parallelize this algorithm. And so you can sort of delay the result. You can delay it as long as possible. But then when it comes time to finally use that random number, they submit that, and it's very quick to verify it on the chain. And Starkware has some extra fancy moon math that allows you to do it very efficiently on the chain. So that's eventually what we'd like to move to. For now, the VRF is pretty powerful. And the sort of the flip side of that data structure I was mentioning earlier is that it's kind of challenging to manipulate in the extent that the addresses, to really move addresses around and change the numbers, it's pretty challenging. As well as we actually lock the pool before the award starts. So we try to mitigate as much as possible any kind of front running of the reveal. Another person asked, what is the purpose utility of the pool token? So the pools themselves, because of their heritage from us being a product team, are mostly autonomous. You don't really have to do a lot of management to them beyond the sort of fairness parameters. But that being said, that they do control the fairness parameters. So the fairness is maintained by. So okay, so let's just back up a bit. How does it work really? If people were able to buy a ticket just seconds before we select the winner, that wouldn't really be fair to everyone else, right? Because they'd basically be able to dump a bunch of money into PoolTogether and then pull it out immediately after. They could potentially even just sandwich attack the reveal. So the first step for us was, of course, to do a two-phase start award, complete award, so we could lock the funds. The second part of that is, okay, let's say they didn't sandwich it like that, but instead they just only spend a few minutes in the pool. How do we punish them? Well, there's an exit fee that decays with time. And so the exit fee is 1%, but in a week that decays to 0. And so it sort of ensures that everyone at least contributes some interest to the pool to some extent. It's not perfect by any means, but rather than being an A experience for some and an F for others, it's kind of a B+ for most people. But we found that people in general haven't noticed it because the time decay is less than the average pool participation time. But so the pool token actually controls those fairness parameters, as well as the reserve rate, so how much of the interest is captured, as well as the ability to swap out the prize strategy. Like I said before, the prize pool itself is non-upgradable, and so we can't actually change it, but we can change the prize strategy. So let's say if people are like, hey, well, why don't we do prizes this way? Well, governance can swap out that prize strategy for something else and do prizes a different way, or perhaps swap out the RNG for the next greatest thing. So yeah, in that way, the pool token is meant for controlling the protocol. Oh, so another question was, if the national government has a monopoly on pool sweepstakes in these countries, how will they view a new competitor? Maybe litigation? I'm not sure. And it's good call in calling it sweepstakes, because that's the closest legal definition that we are to. So, you know, we actually haven't, no one's really reached out to us right now. I feel like we're still pretty small fish, but we do have a legal perspective in place that we, you know, spend a great deal of time working on to at least be ready if something did happen. And it is largely built around sweepstakes laws. But so far, so good. And also, now that we're decentralized and it's controlled by the pool token holders, it's kind of out of our hands. So fortunately, we're in a pretty good position at the moment.
Nice. Yeah, those are a lot of good questions, and thank you for answering them. It's certainly a cool protocol and one that I look forward to trying out myself. So thank you for that presentation, Brendan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, try the Polygon pool. It costs like a hundredth of a penny to enter. It's great.
Right. Oh, it looks like we do have one more question here. You mentioned that PoolTogether is deployed on Polygon now. The fees be reduced to claim pool.
I see. So yeah, that's a good question. The pool liquidity mining is still on Ethereum. And so the pool claiming is still going to be on the Ethereum blockchain. What we have right now on Polygon is Matic liquidity mining. And so when you deposit into our Polygon Tether pool, it will begin to accrue Matic, which you can then claim very cheaply because it's on the Matic network. But likely in the future, we will bridge pool, but I want to do that very cautiously because it fragments voting power. And, you know, that's just a concern for me, is that we sort of lose voting power and perhaps don't reach quorum. So I think ideally we'll have a bridge that you can delegate the votes to, and then at least have some kind of signaling mechanism to control it. But yeah, that's when we're approaching cautiously. So no pool on Polygon yet. No worries.
Great. Thank you for that, Brendan. Appreciate it.